The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets over the empty stretch of Highway 93 just outside Bozeman, Montana, blanketing the world in a silence so complete it felt like the planet had hit pause. Headlights cut through the whiteout like twin knives, illuminating the lone figure stumbling along the shoulder. She was barefoot, her once elegant ivory wedding gown now shredded at the hem, soaked through with melted snow and streaked with mud. The delicate lace that had cost more than most people's rent hung in tatters from her shoulders. Her blonde hair clung to her face in wet ropes, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. She clutched a pair of ruined satin heels in one trembling hand, the other wrapped tightly around her midsection as if holding herself together. Inside the warm cocoon of his Ford F-150, Jack Brennan caught the movement in his peripheral vision and eased off the gas. The truck's chains clinked rhythmically against the ice as he pulled over, hazard lights blinking amber into the storm. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, watching her through the windshield. Something about the way she moved, equal parts determination and collapse, made his chest tighten. He'd seen enough wrecked lives in his 38 years to recognize the difference between someone who'd had too much to drink and someone who'd had too much of everything else. Jesus, he muttered, pulling on his Carhartt jacket. The cold hit him like a physical blow when he stepped out, but he barely felt it. His boots crunched through the fresh powder as he approached her slowly, hands visible at his sides. "Miss, you okay?" She startled at his voice, nearly slipping on the ice. When she turned, Jack saw the full extent of it. The split lip, the bruise blooming across her left cheekbone, the way her whole body shook not just from cold but from something deeper. Her eyes were the pale blue of glacier ice, and they held his for a long moment before dropping to the ground. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the lie. "Just car trouble." Few miles back, Jack followed her gaze to the darkness behind her. There were no taillights, no signs of another vehicle. Just the endless white and the wind that carried her words away almost before they left her mouth. "Look," he said carefully, "it's 20 below out here. You're not dressed for this weather, and you're hurt. Let me give you a ride to town. There's a clinic, a sheriff's office. No police." The words burst out of her like they'd been waiting behind her teeth. She took a step back, and her bare foot came down on something sharp. She gasped, stumbling. Jack moved without thinking, catching her elbow before she hit the ground. Up close, he could see the tremor in her hands, the way her teeth chattered so hard he worried she'd crack one. The wedding dress was designer, some label he'd never remember, but it was doing about as much good as tissue paper against the Montana winter. "Easy. I'm not the police. Name's Jack. I own a garage in town. Been driving this road since before you were born, probably." He tried for a smile, but it felt wrong on his face. "Come on. Truck's warm. We'll figure the rest out once you're not turning into a popsicle." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could practically see the calculations running behind those ice blue eyes. Trust or freeze. Those were the options, and both looked pretty terrible from where she stood. "Emily," she said finally. "My name's Emily." The passenger seat of Jack's truck was a mess of receipts, coffee cups, and the faint smell of motor oil that never quite left his clothes. He cleared it with one sweep of his arm, then helped her up. She moved like someone twice her age, every muscle protesting. When he closed the door, the dome light caught the diamond on her left hand, easily 3 carats, flashing even through the grime. "Seatbelt," he reminded her gently, starting the engine. The heater blasted hot air that smelled faintly of pine air freshener and desperation. Emily fumbled with the belt, her fingers shaking too hard to manage the clip. Jack reached over without asking, clicking it into place. She flinched at the contact but didn't pull away. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it over the engine. They drove in silence for the first few miles. Jack kept his eyes on the road, giving her space to breathe, to decide what came next. The snow kept falling, erasing their tire tracks almost as fast as they made them. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked eventually. No pressure. Just, "Looks like you could use someone to listen." Emily stared out the window at the passing darkness. "I was supposed to get married today." The words hung between them like smoke. "Supposed to," Jack repeated. "Not a question." "The groom." She laughed, but it came out broken. Turns out he had some strong opinions about obedience. And about what happens when his bride disagrees with him in front of his business partners. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd grown up in a house where his father's opinions had been expressed with fists and whiskey breath. Some things you never forgot, no matter how many years passed. So you left. I ran. Barefoot through the snow because he'd taken my shoes, said I wouldn't get far without them. She touched the bruise on her cheek. He was right about that part. The truck's headlights caught the sign for Bozeman city limits. Jack flicked on his turn signal out of habit, though there was no one else on the road. There's a women's shelter in town, he said. Run by a friend of mine, Sarah. She's good people. They'll get you warm, get you medical attention, help you figure out next steps. Emily turned to look at him then, really look. Jack Brennan was built like the mountains he lived in. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, the kind of face that had seen hard winters and harder truths. There was a scar through his left eyebrow, and his eyes were the warm brown of coffee with too much cream. He hadn't once looked at her like she was broken, which was more than she could say for most people who'd seen her tonight. Why are you doing this? She asked. You don't know me. Jack considered the question as he navigated the empty streets. The town was buttoned up tight against the storm, porch lights glowing like beacons through the snow. Because 20 years ago, someone stopped for my mom on a night like this, he said finally. She'd left my dad with nothing but the clothes on her back and me in the backseat. That stranger bought us dinner and drove us to a shelter. Changed everything. He glanced over at her. Figured it was time to pay that forward. They pulled up to a modest brick building with a discreet sign, Hope Haven Women's Shelter. The porch light was on, and a figure appeared in the doorway almost immediately. Sarah, wrapped in a robe, her graying hair in curlers. Jack Brennan, it's 2 a.m, she called out, but her voice softened when she saw Emily. Oh, honey. Getting Emily out of the truck took both of them. Her legs had gone numb from the cold, and the adrenaline was crashing hard. Sarah wrapped her in a blanket that smelled like lavender and safety, murmuring soft reassurances as they guided her inside. The shelter was warm and quiet, the kind of quiet that came from years of holding people's pain without judgment. Sarah settled Emily on a couch with a mug of hot chocolate while Jack hovered awkwardly in the doorway. You don't have to stay, Emily told him. Her voice was steadier now, though her hands still shook around the mug. Wasn't planning to. Jack pulled a business card from his wallet. Brennan's Auto Repair, with his cell number scrawled on the back in pen. But if you need anything, a ride, someone to look at your car once we find it, whatever, call. Emily took the card with fingers that were finally starting to feel again. Why do you write your number on the back? Because the printed one's for customers. This one's for friends. He met her eyes. And anyone who runs 3 miles barefoot through a Montana blizzard in a wedding dress deserves to be called a friend. Sarah walked him out while Emily sipped her cocoa, the warmth spreading through her chest like sunrise. She's got a story, Sarah said quietly on the porch. But she's strong. You did good, Jack. Call if she needs anything. And Sarah, that ex of hers, if he shows up. Then he'll learn what happens when you mess with Montana women. Sarah's smile was sharp. Go home, Jack. Get some sleep. But Jack didn't go home. He drove to the spot where he'd found Emily, following her footprints backward through the snow until they disappeared into a set of tire tracks that veered off the highway. There, half buried in a drift, was a white Mercedes with Utah plates and a dented fender. The driver's door hung open, keys still in the ignition. Inside, the car told its own story. Blood on the steering wheel. A man's dress shoe abandoned on the passenger floor. And in the glove compartment, a marriage license, Emily Catherine Whitmore and Alexander James Harrington III, dated today. Jack took photos with his phone, then called his buddy at the sheriff's office. By the time the tow truck arrived, the snow had started to fill in the scene, but not before Jack found Emily's purse wedged under the seat, her ID confirming what he'd already suspected. This wasn't just a runaway bride. This was attempted murder, dressed up in silk and diamonds. Back at the shelter, Emily had fallen asleep on the couch, still clutching Jack's business card. Sarah covered her with another blanket and sat nearby, keeping watch. When Jack's text came through, found your car. You're safe now. The older woman smiled in the dark. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the tracks of violence and fear. But inside Hope Haven, something new was beginning. A woman who'd run for her life in a wedding dress was learning that sometimes, help came in the form of a stranger with kind eyes and a warm truck. And sometimes, paying it forward meant more than just opening a door. It meant standing guard until the storm passed. Jack drove home through the quiet streets, the weight of the night settling in his bones. Tomorrow there would be questions, statements, maybe even danger if Harrington came looking. But tonight, a woman was safe. Tonight, the chain continued, one stranger's kindness rippling forward through 20 years of Montana winters. In the shelter, Emily stirred in her sleep, Jack's card still clutched in her hand. For the first time in hours, her dreams weren't of running. They were of warm trucks and kind voices and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. The snow fell on, soft and relentless, writing its own quiet story across the Montana landscape. A story of second chances, of strangers who became lifelines, of wedding dresses traded for flannel shirts and the long, hard road to healing. But that was tomorrow's chapter. Tonight, there was only warmth, and safety, and the faint sound of a woman breathing easy for the first time in years.